Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the face of a very tired man after a very long day yesterday, known as Trade Deadline 2019. And as a result, I hope this episode's entertaining, but I cannot make any promises. Yesterday for me was highlighted not only, of course, by the trades that finally went through, but by the 8-hour stream that we had over on Twitch. We followed along from the moment TSN coverage began at 8 a.m. I'm American, but, there's ways to watch. But at 8 a.m., all the way to 4:30 p.m. we followed along, and it was a grind to watch the entirety of Trade Deadline Day coverage, because for a while there was just nothing, and we will absolutely get to that. But thankfully, the final half an hour to 45 minutes or so before the deadline hit, and then even after the deadline hit, as is tradition, finally delivered. Thank God. I do want to say, though, first and foremost, shout out to all of you that hung out with me yesterday. Whole hell of a lot of fun, despite the lack of trades to talk about. Ridiculous amount of support, and I thank you for it. Secondly, I'm not putting the most amount of work into this, so shout out to Cap Friendly. Of course, we're going to be going through the trades on here rather than me being like, ooh, fancy graphic here. Let's talk about this trade. Fancy graphic here. Let's just get right down to it. The meat and potatoes of the episode. It's not an episode, it's a video. It's going to be a weird one. I haven't been up for that long either, but I slept. Oh boy, did I sleep for a long time. So, first trade I want to talk about here did not happen on Deadline Day. I want to talk about a couple of the trades that led up to Deadline Day, because I haven't really given my opinions on trades in videos. I've talked about it on Twitter or on Twitch, but in video form, I haven't really talked about it, right? So we get to Anthony Stolarz and Cam Talbot. Talbot has still not played a game for Philadelphia, and it's not really surprising that he was dealt with Mikko Koskinen signing the contract that he did. Nice one, Edmonton. I don't hate the deal for either team, and I doubt Cam Talbot sticks around unless they let Brian Elliott go. No changes, of course, happened with Philadelphia's goaltending, although the rumor appears to be that Carter Hart might be going down to the AHL with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms for their playoff run, which is probably smart, but one has to wonder what kind of playoff run, if any, the Flyers will have if Carter Hart's not their goaltender. Brian Elliott's back, though. He did get the win on the Stadium Classic, so you got that going for you. The Ryan Spooner trade... It was a year ago that everyone's like, my God, the Rangers, they fleeced the Bruins on the Spooner trade. Not quite. Ryan, I wish you all the best, though. Still kind of wish he was a Bruin, but this trade, along with one of the next trades we're going to talk about, just goes to show how the Bruins lately have had the trend of drafting skill players and then not having them be able to crack their way into the top six, or the team preferring to go with different options for the top six. We will get into that. The Darren Raddysh-Peter Holla trade was weird. We get to the first big trade. I think the first trade a lot of people will consider to be a part of Deadline Day on February 20th. Charlie Coyle to Boston for Ryan Donato and a 5th-round pick that can become a 4th-round pick if the Bruins make it to the 2nd round, which, God, I hope they do. I don't hate this trade. Now, Ryan Donato's gone on to a hot start with Minnesota, scoring a game-winning goal. Charlie Coyle has a sick shootout goal to his credit in the shootout that the Bruins lost. I don't hate this deal. It sucks to see Ryan Donato go. Let me make that the first point right off the bat. It sucks to see him go. His dad grew up with his dad being a Boston Bruin. Then he plays for the Bruins and gets traded. He was never going to get the top 6 time that he probably deserved, and again, that's a continued trend. You look at someone like Ryan Spooner, Ryan Donato, there have been so many others, someone like Alex Kovalchev just saying, nope, I'm going back to Russia because I'm not going to get this time. It's been a trend on the Bruins for a decade now, where it's been very difficult to break into the top 6 and get that required ice time, and whether it be Claude Julien, Bruce Cassidy, obviously the big emphasis is on defensive responsibility, and sometimes those guys can't exactly hold up, like, say, a Charlie Coyle could in terms of defense, and it's a debatable point still. I don't hate the trade. Is Ryan Donato going to become a very good player? I hope so. I do. Is Charlie Coyle going to be a very good player for Boston? He has 1 extra year on his contract. I hope so. And obviously, as a Bruins fan heading into Deadline Day, my hope was, okay, don't let this be the only move that you make. Thankfully, it wasn't. But I view this as the Bruins getting better now, mainly out of necessity to try and keep up with a Tampa and a Toronto, really. Montreal even, too. They're still hanging around. So my thoughts on this trade, I don't hate it. We'll see what Ryan Spooner becomes in the future. For now, I think it's fair to say Charlie Coyle is the better player. Minnesota's going through their own retooling, which we will get into. This was hardly Minnesota's worst trade of deadline day. I feel like it's a pretty damn good trade for both teams. Carl Hagelin to Washington, which, I mean, last year Washington getting Michael Kempny, it was a move that went under the radar. Carl Hagelin's stock isn't nearly as high as it's been in the past. It's a decent enough deal for LA to get some draft picks back, especially with a conditional 6th. And guess what? That's the word of this deadline day. Get used to the term conditional draft pick. You're going to be hearing it a lot from this point on throughout your life, apparently, because this is the hot new thing to do. Carl Hagelin to Washington, though, on retained salary. It's a good deal for Washington, good deal for Los Angeles. There's really not too much to mention. And then we get, oh boy, and we get to the Ottawa Senators, don't we? Matt Duchene and Julius Bergman, who would not be a Blue Jacket for long, to Columbus in exchange for Vitaly Abramov, Jonathan Davidson, and, shocker, 2 conditional draft picks. Here's the thing, right? I mean, it's probably the talk of the deadline, and really, if you look at the big picture of what's gone on with Ottawa over the past few seasons, really, since they were, of course, 1 goal away from a Stanley Cup final, just the amount of turnover, the amount of players who are no longer there. I believe they said on TSN coverage that there was 5 players left from that game 7, who are on the roster that are still with the Senators. That said, I think the return for Matt Duchene is okay. Obviously, this doesn't help negate the fact that to give up Matt Duchene, Colorado now has your first pick, which is very likely to be the pick that takes Jack Hughes or Capo Caco, perhaps. They still did okay on the return. Abramov is solid, Davidson solid, and again, potentially 2 first-round picks. Not a bad little haul. So for Ottawa, if you want to say it's a bad deal because they shouldn't have been in this situation to begin with, I don't blame you. I'm somewhat comparing it to the Montreal Canadiens situation, where to me, in terms of, hey, we're rebuilding, in the past couple of years, I don't really feel like they should have been, and unless I don't give Marc Bergevin too much credit for, getting a decent return, because you're the one that put yourself into that mess in the first place. If someone doesn't want to give Ottawa too much credit because they put themselves into this mess in the first place, I don't blame you, but I don't hate this trade for them. And then obviously, for Columbus, this will not be the last trade that we discuss, as they are going for it. They are all in, some might say. And Matt Duchene's a really good addition. Let's hope he stays out of any Ubers. Get your own driving and make sure to check every vehicle for cameras. Or just an idea, keep your mouth shut in public when talking about your coaching. Wait until you're at the dinner table. Maybe. Don't do it in a cab. Damn. So really, all things considered with Ottawa, they get a pretty damn good return on Duchene's value, considering he hurt his own value that much more. So it's not a bad deal. I don't like declaring winners and losers all that often, especially in the immediate aftermath of a trade, but I do feel confident in saying this is a good deal for both teams. Now, for, again, Ottawa, it depends on the draft picks. For Columbus, you better win, because this is going to be a very interesting offseason for you if you fall short in the playoffs. Again, Vincent Patan was dealt to Florida. That happened. Madison Bowie in a 2nd for Nick Jensen and a 5th. Interesting in that Nick Jensen immediately signs. For Bowie, I like the deal to Detroit. He needed a change of scenery. And for Washington, who's to say this won't be another Michael Kempny pickup? I don't hate the deal for either team. I love the return for Detroit, getting back a younger player, 2nd-round pick as well. And for Washington, I mean, they're not on top of the Metro right now, but they're pretty close. And if you were to tell me that, what is the date? If you were to tell me that 4 months from now, the Capitals are going to repeat, I don't think I'd be surprised. I don't think I'd be surprised at all. Ben Lovejoy for Connor Carrick and a 3rd. Relatively interesting. Don't blame Dallas for wanting to get more of a sure thing on defense. And obviously, certain plans for the Dallas Stars haven't exactly gone according to plan for them. But I don't hate the deal. Connor Carrick gets another opportunity to try and get something going in New Jersey. The Devils, of course, unfortunately for them, not exactly in a playoff spot this year. overall not a bad deal, and certainly not the biggest deal that we could possibly talk about. We get to another Ottawa deal. Ryan Dzingel and a 7th for Anthony Duclair and 2 second-round picks. Love the pickup for Columbus, again, for the part of them going all in for it. Is it an overpayment? Some people don't quite believe in Ryan Dzingel at this point. 2 second-round picks, though, especially when compared to some of the other returns that we've seen. It's not the highest, but also it's kind of in line with what someone of his skill level gets in this trade deadline. So, overall, another chance for Anthony Duclair to get something going in Ottawa. It's going to be interesting to see if he can. I mean, he started off hot this year with Columbus scoring perhaps the goal of the season. 2 second-round picks as well. Not a bad return for the Sens. Right now, though, I mean, I'd say advantage Blue Jackets for the fact that, again, they are absolutely all in. Perhaps the most depressing trade of the deadline, Matt Zuccarello to Dallas, and the story picks up there from his first game as a Star, scores a goal, and then breaks his arm, and is going to be out for a month, which is just brutal for Dallas. How can you not feel bad? How can you not feel bad for him? You know, what he's done, you know, with the Rangers. You see the Henrik Lundqvist interview, and that was rough to watch. It's a damn shame. What did he do to deserve that, hockey gods? It's a really good shot block, though. I'll give him credit. Hopefully he'll be back in time, and perhaps more surprising, Dallas didn't do anything after this to make up for it. So just hoping that the team can hold on. Zuccarello comes in, and hoping that they can make the playoffs. They are. I kind of don't care. But still, not a bad return for the Rangers. Of course, conditional draft picks. They're the best, according to every GM now in the world. So many conditional picks. This one was surprising. Brandon Montour to Buffalo for Brendan Goulet and a conditional first-round pick. I'm just going to stop saying the word conditional. You should expect every draft pick to be conditional at this point. For Buffalo, Montour is an interesting one in terms of, you know, point production, moving with the puck, pretty good. In terms of being in his own zone, it's a bit hit or miss. Brendan Goulet, not the biggest piece to give up, but he could still end up being something for Anaheim in the draft pick. You know, we'll see. I mean, especially too, we don't even know where it's going to be. It's either going to be San Jose's or St. Louis's pick, so time will tell there. For Buffalo, it's really weird, though, how this led into the Ristolainen to Tampa Bay rumors, which would make no sense, considering you're not going to give up a prospect and a first for Goulet just to trade Risto for, I would assume, a first, a prospect, and a little bit more. Wouldn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. So it's a good pickup for Buffalo, a decent sign that they're still going for it and want to be a playoff team this year. And if they're not a playoff team this year, they'll certainly expect to be next season. And for Anaheim, it's not the weirdest trade that they made on deadline day or heading into deadline day. I like the return for them. We'll get into a little bit more. Although, again, I saw a lot of Ducks fans who were just furious at this deal. I don't think it's that bad. Now, is Montour the type of piece that you want to get rid of when you need to retool, if not outright rebuild? Probably not, but hey, it is what it is. Spencer Watson was dealt to Chicago. Cool. Way to go. And Matheson, best of luck in Los Angeles. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Nick Baptiste for future considerations. That's a blockbuster. Gustav Nyquist was traded at about 2 a.m. Eastern Time. I would know. I was live on Twitch at the time. Traded to San Jose for a second and a conditional third, which can become a second if they make it to the final or if Nyquist resigns. San Jose needed to make a move before San Jose needed to make a move, if that makes sense. The outlook for the Sharks right now is pretty bright, but had they not made this move, given what the rest of the Western Conference, mainly the other big three competitors, did on deadline day, if they hadn't made this move, Sharks fans would be a little bit more nervous than they might already be, given what those moves were. Nyquist is a really good pickup. You don't have to give up too much to get it done. The Sharks are absolutely in win-now mode, and Nyquist should help. Hopefully. They're going to need the help. Get Joe Thornton a cup, though, please. I beg you. Patrick Seeloff for Ryan Gibbons. Let's just hope that Seeloff doesn't hurt anybody in practice. Yes, people deserve second chances, but Patrick, that is going to follow you for the rest of your career. we started off the morning of deadline day. These two trades happened overnight. We start off the morning with Keith Kincaid to New Jersey, and everyone's like, my God, Bobrovsky's going to get traded. No. Kincaid and Korpisalo, both now in Columbus, of course, both have sub 900 save percentages. You're not trading Bobrovsky. Now, is this the sign that Bobrovsky might leave after the season? Even then, I still don't think that's Columbus's big move of being like, okay, well, if Bobrovsky leaves, we have Kincaid and Korpisalo. It just doesn't make any sense. So, for me, I see this as simply Columbus. If something happens to Bobrovsky heading into the playoffs, you at least have options between Kincaid and Korpisalo, rather than just saying, Joonas Korpisalo, you're our guy, good luck, which isn't a safe bet at this point. New Jersey gets a 5th-round pick back. Let's be honest, too. Schneider wasn't going anywhere. You do have Mackenzie Blackwood coming up, and for Devils fans, you need to hope that it all works out with him. First big trade of the day. I do want to say it felt like there were 2 to 3 hours in between those two trades. It was so bad. Winnipeg gets Kevin Hayes for Brendan Lemieux, a conditional first, and a conditional fourth. Of course, those picks will end up being what they are. To answer the question, by the way, on the roster editing front, this is why I don't wait until after the trade deadline update from EA to do anything, because with all these conditional picks, really, they're not even going to be accurate. EA will move a first and a fourth, but who's to say that's going to be the realistic haul for the Rangers in return for the Hayes trade? We don't know yet. We won't know for a while. So I don't really care about having the accurate trades. Back on the topic at hand, though, Winnipeg desperately needed a second-line center. Maybe not desperately, but they needed a center, especially after they weren't able to retain Stastny after last year's deal. Second year in a row, they traded the first-round pick for a center at the deadline. Winnipeg, if they weren't scary before, they're still scary now, especially with Patrik Laine heating up a little bit. I can't believe some people thought Patrik Laine might get traded. That is batshit insane. And for the Rangers, not a bad haul. Brendan Lemieux is an interesting player, from the same ilk of a Brendan Gallagher, who just loves to piss people off from the looks of it. And the draft picks, you can't really do all that wrong. So the Rangers rebuild that they started heading into the deadline last year, it's looking pretty damn good. And maybe, just maybe, another team that we're not going to be talking about today should have done something similar. Edmonton. Love the Kevin Hayes pickup, though, for Winnipeg. Did they overpay? Maybe, but sometimes you got to pay a little bit more to get what you really want. That chapeau for Jordan Wheel. That happened. I'd say Montreal got the better player out of that deal, but, Arizona also had, I think, Christian Dvorak coming back from injury, so it kind of makes more sense that you would be able to send down Michael Chaput. Speaking of poo, Carolina. This trade, there were other trades that broke after this that I could not focus on. Simply could not. Carolina trades Cliff Poo to Florida right now for nothing. The mystery box. You traded Jeff Skinner to Buffalo for Cliff Poo and draft picks, and now you've given up Cliff Poo for literally nothing at the moment. Boy. When the bunch of jerks, t-shirts, and taglines. I don't know, man. There were two very interesting trades, and this was one of them. I don't get it. Carolina. I don't get it. Cliff Poo's 20 years old. He's not doing all that well in the AHL this year. He had done all right in the ECHL. 5 points in 5 games, I think. How do you give up on a 20-year-old when you just got him and you traded a top guy to get him? And then there were the rumors that you were going to potentially trade Ferland and that you were looking for a top 6 guy, like the one that you got rid of in Jeff Skinner. I don't understand. I do not. There was also another deal for the Florida Panthers, trading Derick Brassard and a conditional 6th if Brassard does not resign. They don't get anything. Basically, right now, Derick Brassard for a 3rd-round pick. Brassard's value has dropped off this year. Of course, he was a part of the Nick Bjugstad trade, not having the best season of his career by any stretch of the imagination. So all in all, not a bad deal for the Panthers to at least get something back for him, as they're still very much in limbo as to whether or not they're going to be able to pull off another miraculous comeback to try and get into playoff contention. Adam McQuaid dealt to Columbus, the Blue Jackets, just adding players from out of nowhere. But McQuaid back with the team that drafted him for Julius Bergman. Told you he wasn't going to be a Blue Jacket for long. A 4th and a 7th. I mean, this happened. It's a pretty decent haul for the Rangers, although apparently Julius Bergman is already committed to going over and playing in Sweden next year. So it's really McQuaid for a 4th and a 7th, but if Bergman ever comes back, the Rangers have his rights. And a 4th and a 7th for McQuaid, that's not too bad of a haul. I love me some Adam McQuaid, and I'll be intrigued to see what role he plays in Columbus. And this, in between these two trades, it took a little bit of time to get the ball rolling. But finally it happened. This was the trade that finally broke the levee down and led to the flurry of trades in the final half an hour and the hour and a half or so after the deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern. Fenton Berg to Calgary. Good depth pickup for them. I don't hate it. And this is the other big trade that I just cannot believe happened. Kevin Fiala for Mikael Granlund, straight up. 1 for 1. I do not understand how Minnesota doesn't get a little bit more back in return here. Granlund is a 60 to 70 point guy. Has 1 year left on his deal after this, I do believe. I don't get it. Fiala's younger. You know, he's going to be an RFA at the end of the year. I get that. You know, if you're the Minnesota Wild right now, even though you're in a playoff spot, obviously you're looking to retool a little bit. They did re-sign Eric Stahl after the deadline as well. I get that you're wanting to get a little bit younger, retool a little bit. You know, you got rid of Charlie Coyle, bring in Ryan Donato. How do you not at least get something else back in this? I mean, Kevin Fiala is a 30 to 40 point guy. He's 22 years old. Granlund, again, a 50 to 60 point guy. What a massive win for Nashville. It might end up being a decent enough deal for Minnesota, but right now, it is a massive deal for Nashville, especially when you look at what Winnipeg had done earlier in the day, and again, what San Jose had done earlier in the day, and again, with what is still to come with the Vegas Golden Knights. But this was the other big head scratcher for me. How the hell is that 1 for 1? Huge win for Nashville if Granlund plays to the full extent of his abilities. And then we get to the last big sentence trade. Mark Stone to Vegas, where he immediately signs a max contract, 8 years, $9.5 million per with the Knights. Toby Lindbergh also goes over for Oscar Lindbergh, no relation, I do believe, a 2nd-round pick, and the big fish here, Erik Brannstrom. For Vegas, is it an overpayment? That's the debatable point here, is people's opinions on how much Ottawa got back, whether or not Vegas overspent. The bottom line is for Vegas, again, you look at what Winnipeg had done, you look at what Nashville and San Jose had done. Those right now are the big 4, the big 3 in the way of Vegas. For me, out of the deadline, no particular order, it is San Jose, Vegas, Nashville, Winnipeg, Calgary in 5th at best for me in terms of right now where the hype level kind of is. And that's not a slight at Calgary. That just goes to show how crazy good the Western Conference is. This is a trade where you could sit here and argue over who won for the next 3 years. We're not going to know for a while. But like I said, Vegas gets exactly what they need to stay competitive. Ottawa gets a major prospect back. Someone viewed as untouchable for the Golden Knights at one point. I'm excited to see how it goes down. I mean, again, I think a lot of people are like, how the hell was there not a first-round pick involved? Brannstrom is that highly touted, and I have to say this, Sens fans, but I think we'd all agree, if there was one team where I'd be worried that, oh boy, they might not get the most out of Brannstrom's development, it would be Ottawa. Edmonton's a close second. It's going to be very interesting, but again, Vegas gets exactly what they need to get, to get back on level with the best of the West. Speaking of the best of the West, the Nashville Predators. Wayne Simmons going to the Purds for Ryan Hartman and a conditional 4th. All I can speak to is the reaction of one fellow YouTuber in my Twitch chat at the time, Bojo KO. You might be familiar. No Tolvanen, screw you, Fletcher. It's very interesting. I mean, Ryan Hartman, if you look at it, it's not the biggest name in the world. He's not that bad, though. It's not his fault that, dealt for a first-round pick, ends up on Chicago when they're retooling. I don't hate this deal for either team, especially for Nashville, to get another big piece to go alongside Granlund to keep them as one of the best in the West by far. And again, the Western Conference, it is going to be such a slugfest out of the top 4 to 5 teams there that I can't help but think whoever makes it out of the East has the advantage, much like last year with Washington. You look at what Winnipeg and that, just what Winnipeg and Vegas had to go through to get to the conference final. Absolute slugfest. I like the deal for Nashville. Simmons is solid. I like the deal for Philly. I know, no first-round pick, no Tolvanen, but time will tell. Is this major loss for the Flyers that a lot of people are labeling it as? Not yet, at least. And then, oh yes, we'll save that other one for a minute later. Marcus Johansen to the Bruins for a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. I was hoping all day that the Bruins would get Mark Stone, and then I saw what Mark Stone went for and what he had to be signed for, and I said, okay, kind of glad that didn't happen. And then I was hoping for Wayne Simmons, and even then, I'm like, that would have been okay. And then the Marcus Johansen news came down. 2 draft picks for Johansen. I'm okay with that. Bruins didn't have to give up a roster player. They do get that extra piece that they desperately needed. Their draft or their trade deadline couldn't just go down to, hey, here's Charlie Coyle, and he's going to help fix everything. They needed that extra piece. Is Johansen a perfect fit in Boston? Probably not, and obviously there's the awkwardness that everyone's talking about as far as him being, elbowed in the head by Brad Marchand last season. But still, I like the pickup. He's on 40% retained salary, which is still great. I mean, he's a UFA at the end of the year, but I'm very intrigued to see what he can do. And for the Bruins, if you look at the addition of Coyle and Johansen, gives them a much, much better chance to be able to keep up with the likes of Toronto and Tampa, although again, the Lightning are still the big-time favorites out of the Eastern Conference by far. But overall, I'm very happy with the Bruins deadline day. I mean, I joked about it. I figured they'd get a Luke Glendening and just be like, hey, we're good. Thank God that wasn't the case. Apparently they were kicking tires on Vanek. He didn't want to move. Eric Stahl as well. He didn't want to move. Marcus Johansen, you're my bronze medal, and I'm happy to have you here. And then, I don't know if this was the biggest meme of a trade on the day, but it might have been close. Eric Branson, 1-for-1 Tanner Pearson. The Pittsburgh Penguins, ladies and gentlemen. Jim Rutherford has built up a lot of leeway. He deserves that leeway as a 2-time Cup champion with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Doesn't mean that you're excused from criticism on this one. Eric Branson, Jack Johnson on the same defense. Now look, I know, Letang's out, Demoulin's out, they needed some help, but I kind of feel like they were already okay. I'm not saying that Pettersson and Ricola and Chad Ruedel were going to help lead you to a cup, but does Eric Branson help out all that much? I don't know. No retained salary either. Pittsburgh, what are you doing? Jonathan Dahlan for Linus Karlsson was a huge move because within 10 minutes you had people being like, oh my God, Jim Benning got rid of Eric Branson. And then, oh my God, Jim Benning traded Jonathan Dahlan. It was very interesting. I mean, there are conflicting stories coming out already. Jonathan Dahlan wanted to be traded. If Jonathan Dahlan stayed, you had to think of the Seattle expansion. It's still a shocking deal. Linus Karlsson is a 3rd-round pick of the Sharks. He's playing in the Swedish 2nd tier right now and not exactly lighting it up. It's going to be interesting to see if he ends up becoming anything for Vancouver. And really, with both of these guys, they're both still in the prospect phase of their career. It's way too early to declare a winner, although the bigger name with more hype certainly went to San Jose. And then you have another interesting deal. Par Lindholm to Winnipeg. The Jets ended up making a couple of minor moves right after the deadline ended, as of course all the offers were filing through. It is Par Lindholm for Nick Patan. And I'll say this, I'm not anti-Nick Patan. But my God, some of the instant reactions that I saw to this trade was like, oh my God, the Leafs just fleeced Winnipeg. Nick Patan's going to be great for us. It's us, of course, talking about some Leafs fans. I don't hate the move. Does Nick Patan have a higher ceiling right now than Par Lindholm? Yes. Is Par Lindholm a better player right now? debatable. But in terms of like, oh my God, yes, Nick Patan, he's going to be great. We'll wait and see. There's no indication that he's going to be great just because of a change of scenery. But I don't know. I don't know. There were just some people who I think were blowing that trade way out of proportion. And maybe it's just because Leafs Nation was desperate for anything on deadline day. Although for me, of course, their big move is Jake Muzzin. Did they need to go out and get another defenseman? Maybe. You got Nick Patan instead. Matt Hendricks back to Winnipeg. That's a fine move. Chris Weidman to Pittsburgh. Again, I don't hate that move either. It's just kind of more of a lateral move to help out the defense. And JSD was there as well. Alex Broadhurst to Winnipeg. Bogdan Kislevich to Winnipeg. Nathan Beaulieu to Winnipeg. I think the Jets wanted depth. And Michael Del Zotto gets dealt again, this time to the Blues, which again, sure. It was a very, very weird day. It took until, aside from the Kevin Hayes deal, the last hour or so for the big deals to file through. And overall, when looking at the day, again, it was fun to follow along, if not quite boring at some times. But overall, it ended up being a very interesting deadline day to talk about. Again, I don't necessarily like declaring winners and losers, especially when there are so many trades that involve draft picks and we just don't know how everything is going to go down, right? But I would say, for the most part, I mean, if you think about the big names, right? I mean, personally, I feel like the Bruins did quite well. Washington did okay. Ottawa did pretty well in terms of their return, but obviously it's depressing for them to be the worst team in the league and for them to get rid of their three top scorers. Columbus is going for it, and Blue Jackets fans should absolutely be excited. Detroit did relatively well in the returns that they had. Dallas did quite well. Obviously, the Zuccarello injury is an absolute nightmare for them. Buffalo, whether or not they can sneak into a playoff spot, Montour should help, but again, he is not a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination. Again, I like what the Sharks did with Nyquist. They kind of had to do it, especially again when you look at what happened around them elsewhere in the Western Conference. Solid return for the New York Rangers on some of their deals. I like the Kevin Hayes pickup for Winnipeg a lot. I like Winnipeg's moves in general in terms of stocking up with a ton of depth. Florida did okay, by the way, under the radar, but, a third-round pick, Cliff Poo, I mean, they got some interesting pieces. Nothing anything, overly ridiculous. Nashville are gigantic winners, in my opinion. The Vegas Golden Knights got the best player available around this deadline. And really, for Philly, I don't hate it. Time will tell, though, won't it? I also don't think New Jersey did that bad, stocking up on quite a few draft picks. I talked for 8 hours about all this yesterday. Talked about it for Lord knows how long now. I'm trade deadlined out, damn it. But very interesting day. Intrigued to hear your opinion on who you think won, certain trades, the overall day. Like I said, though, in terms of maybe declaring big winners, not necessarily. Because even saying, I like the Nathan Beaulieu for a sixth move for both teams. Who knows what that sixth round pick will be. Maybe Nathan Beaulieu will finally live up to his potential for the Winnipeg Jets. Maybe Nathan Beaulieu and Bogdan Kislevich will be Stanley Cup champions in just a few short months. Time will tell. I cannot be bothered to talk anymore, so I thank you guys for watching. I will see you again soon with whatever the hell else. I might go back and take another nap because, Jesus, that was a long 8 hours yesterday.